This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
To She Wasn't Born Yesterday for women who are 40 plus fabulous by the Empty Nest Chicks. I'm Janet Evans, ex-M&C Saatchi advertising creative, who have won numerous radio and TV awards. Not that that'll affect us because we're doing a podcast.
And I'm Dr. Amelia Haynes, who has been a medical doctor for 30 years and specialising in sexual health and mental health and relationships, and I'm generally a very useful human being.
Well, we'll find out about that, but we are here to work together.
People tell me on good authority that I am.
Really? Yes, well, they never say that to me, so I think we're the perfect hosts for She Wasn't Born Yesterday. Well, Dr. Amelia, I was a little bit shocked to hear the stat that around 67% of Aussies are considered overweight or obese. And that's June 2024, that figure. I mean, that is an awful lot of Aussies. And actually in regional and remote areas, the percentage is even higher. So what do you think is behind this sort of, it feels like an epidemic, but I don't know, that's a fancy word for just saying there's a lot of people in that situation.
We live in an age where the food, well, one is expensive and bad food is cheaper.
Yes.
So there's that, and there's getting more sedentary as you get older.
Yes.
All sorts of factors,
Yes,
Janet.
I guess there is. And I mean, as women who are 40 plus fabulous, we do notice that we do seem to put on weight a little bit more easily than when we were 20 plus fabulous. And, I don't know about you, but I used to be able to chow down on a lot of things at lunchtime, like a burger or a lot of sangers, a big bowl of pasta. Today, no way. I'd have to have a little power nap after some of that. But I just can't seem to sort of process the same amount or types of food that I used to be able to. But obesity seems to be a specialised thing in itself because, there are, I guess, obese people who are obese because they're eating the wrong things and not doing enough exercise. But equally, I'm sure that there are other reasons for it.
There are genetics, there are diseases, there are all sorts of reasons, actually, which I feel like our guest this afternoon is much more of an expert on than either you or I.
So what a lovely segue into introducing the very, very fabulous Dr. Jenny Matthei, who is a bariatric specialist. Welcome to She Wasn't Born Yesterday, Jenny.
Oh, thanks, girls. It's great to be joining on the podcast. And it's good to be also sharing about something that I feel really passionate about, and that's helping people with their weight, and especially when they're 40 plus.
Yes. Well, I mean, I guess to start off with, what actually is a bariatric specialist? What do you actually do?
I had a background in general practice, but I now just work in a niche role helping people manage their weight. And I work in a private multidisciplinary clinic so that we've got surgeons, we've got a nurse, we've got a dietitian, and we've got me as the medical doctor. We work together to help people manage this chronic disease, which we call obesity. The bariatric part of it refers to the surgeons who do surgery to help with weight management. So they do some procedures such as a bypass or a sleeve, and those weight loss procedures in the medical world are known as bariatric surgery. And so I'm specialising working alongside the surgeons, helping people that have had weight loss surgery, but I also help people who haven't had weight loss surgery to get on top of their weight with various strategies.
Oh, wow. Something I'd like to know is what's the difference between being overweight and obese?
It's all a spectrum of the same thing. So it's not like something magically happens, but we make a definition of what is overweight and obese based on a thing called BMI or body mass index. And it's just a ratio between our height in metres squared on the bottom of the ratio and our weight in kilograms on the top of the ratio, and we come up with a number. And that number, if it's 20 to 25 is normal, 25 to 30 is overweight, and if it's over 30, then we call it obese. But as you can tell, it's just a rough measure. It's not the only factor that plays into that.
Yes, because I think there would be, we used to sort of make a little bit of joke about things like, oh, I've just got big bones. But is that actually a thing, like someone could actually just have a big kind of structure inside them that doesn't get factored into this BMI thing?
Well, it can be. It could be your bones, but it also, if you're a weightlifter, if you were only going on that ratio between height and weight, you could end up being told you're overweight, and yet you don't actually have this condition called obesity, which kind of comes down to thinking about what it is. And that is, obesity is a disease where you have an excess amount of fat deposited in your body. So it's actually a disease of the fat cells. Obviously, if your weight is because you've got lots of muscles, because you're a bodybuilder, then you're not going to have the disease of obesity. I mean, there are other ways, such as a DEXA scan, where we do like a fancy X-ray where we can see how much fat and how much muscle and how much bone is in the body. But it's also not only about the amount of fat, it's where the fat lies. You know, the classic female carry fat on your thighs is not as dangerous to our health as the fat that's actually sitting around our middle. And in particular, not just the fat that's outside the muscles of our tummy, but actually the fat that's inside our tummy and around the organs in there. And that's the sort of fat that's going to lead to issues like heart disease and kidney disease and liver disease and some of those other diseases that are actually not very good for us in the long run.
Yeah.
And are kind of the friends of obesity. They hang around, they go together with people that have obesity.
No one's friends with obesity, surely.
I was going to say...
It's like salad.
But the important thing too is that Jenny's not talking about something that's purely aesthetic. No. She's actually talking about things that actually make you unwell.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, when you say it's a disease...
Yeah, it's a disease and it's related to metabolic health. And look, you know, it's not that people don't struggle with the appearance side of carrying excess fat, but it's much more than that, and it has much more of an impact on our health going forward. And I suppose since we're talking about the 40 plus and fabulous, the older we get, the more, although we may not like what we look like if we're carrying excess weight, the more important those metabolic health issues become as we get into those years. And often there'll be different reasons people have to come and get help for their condition.
What are some of those reasons? Like, what actually causes it, aside from just drinking too many Pepsis every day or whatever?
So we know that it's very strongly inherited through our genes, but it is a lifestyle disease, and we know that the genes get turned on by certain things in our environment and things inside other things that happen. And we call that epigenetics, where the genetic predisposition to actually put weight on has been there, and it's been there probably for generations in our family. But there's been certain things that have happened in your life or in your environment that turn those genes on. And that does explain why sometimes, why we've got more people in our society that have obesity now than maybe their grandparents' era.
Yeah, because their grandparents didn't have KFC.
Yeah, they didn't have KFC.
Yeah.
Yes, no. So, and I think in your intro you alluded to the fact that we have a lot of things that we call food that are actually just ultra-processed ingredients that aren't real food. Yeah. And also high-calorie drinks have had a big part to play in the turning on of this condition. It's not someone's fault, and I think that's the thing. It took a long time for the medical community to actually accept that it wasn't just a moral failure, that people were doing certain behaviours and had consequences, but it actually is as much of a disease as diabetes or heart disease or blood pressure or kidney disease, asthma. And those things aren't your fault. If you've got asthma, it's not your fault. If you've got diabetes, it's not your fault. And same is with obesity. You might have done things that flare it up, but it's not your fault. And people find that really helpful because there's a lot of bias around obesity.
Definitely.
A lot of judgment.
A lot of judgment.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of bias. And the longer I've cared for patients with this condition, the more I'm seeing that it's not that they have KFC 5 days a week. I'm not saying no one ever does, but some of them can be eating as healthy as someone who doesn't live with excess weight, and yet their body holds on to that weight, and it's very difficult.
And so this metabolism, obviously too, would slow down as you age. Is that right?
Well, that tends to happen as well.
Yes, it does happen.
Yeah.
And certainly when we go through menopause and we don't have as much estrogen around, we become a bit more insulin resistant. And so when we have the higher carb or higher sugary foods, our body doesn't cope with those as well, which is why a lot of people have to change what they do at the point where they go through menopause.
Yes, right. And so how do you work with people before and after bariatric surgery to help them kind of make changes that they can live with for the rest of their lives?
Well, it's really been a growing area, hasn't it, Jenny? Like this is
literally.
Yeah, very funny. I was going to say this is very good having Jenny on chatting today because there are great inroads in understanding and treatment for this disease, as you point out. There is the surgery, which has been around for a while. And in fact, Jenny, I heard about this form of, it's not even surgery, where you can actually swallow a balloon now and it will be pumped up once you swallowed it in your stomach. And I thought that was quite cool. Anything to avoid surgery. But also there are the pills now to treat it and other kind of really good preparations for people to take and a few other medications which are a little bit less kind of expensive and high tech like metformin and so on. You know what I mean? There are lots and lots of things that people can do now, aren't there, Jenny?
Yes, and one of the great things we've got, as we've come to understand the underlying drivers of obesity, we've come to understand the role the brain has in setting the weight that we are. So we have lots of things that prevent us from starving to death. And so lots of parts of our brain drive us to eat.
Yes.
Our eyes and seeing food, our social parts of our brain, our addictive parts of our brain. And then at its core is a part of our brain that unconsciously drives us to eat. So it's the part of the brain that actually gets our pulse going, that drives us to breathe. And it actually drives us to eat. And what's more, it also drives the sort of foods we like and foods we don't like. And now we've found out about how that works. There are now a number of medications that act on that part of the brain to help people to lose weight and for the hormones that control fullness and hunger to work better because they are not working properly in this condition. And what is really interesting is patients will reflect to me that food that they've always liked, they don't like anymore when that part of the brain's working properly.
Yeah.
And so we think that
fascinating.
our eating behaviours are very much, we're very proud as, 40 plus women. We think we've got control over everything we do. But in actual fact, some of the choices of foods we make and our eating, a lot of it's unconsciously driven, which is really interesting. And
wow, so you can blame your brain.
You can blame your
becoming
brain.
overweight.
Yes.
I didn't do it, my brain did.
Yes. And I think although this is a growing area of research, I think there's complex interactions between our gut microbiome, so the gut bacteria that live in our gut and our brain and how they all work together to regulate our metabolism and regulate the foods that we choose to eat.
Wow. So is it possible your brain seems to be for some reason telling you that you need to eat lots of fatty food or something, and the more you eat it, the more kind of addicted you get to it? How does it work?
I think the brain's much more finely tuned on the amount of sugar it needs, the amount of protein it needs, fat and other things, and it has feedback mechanisms, which we in our society have overridden those in the sense that, I don't know about you, but, that whole when you're a child, don't leave things on your plate because, there's people starving in the world. And so we, from childhood, have actually have actually learnt to override our appetite and our sense of fullness. Okay. And so we've learnt to eat for a lot of other reasons. We call that non-hungry eating. If we're stressed, if we're happy, if we're sad, if we're bored.
Yeah. Okay.
Coming back to the original question you asked me, we now have a full range of interventions, really, from dietary interventions, from meal replacement shakes, to various medications, of which some of them are less potent and some of them are quite powerful now. It's right through to the gastric balloon, right through to more permanent things like a gastric bypass or a gastric sleeve and these bariatric surgical procedures. But where that's excellent is it means someone's who's a little bit overweight, you're not going to give them the most extreme intervention. You can work at giving them an intervention that now matches what they are needing in order to get on top of their weight. And so we're in a really good situation now where we can work on a number of things that contribute to this condition.
And so is it a holistic kind of view that you take with each person? So it's
everyone's individual
diet and exercise and potentially what they're doing, their work.
Yeah. And I'm sure, Amelia would know a lot about this coming in from a mental health point of view, but there's a lot of connection between emotions and our mental health and our eating drives. We've been eating since we were very little people, and so we've got very well-worn pathways in our brain around coping strategies and around eating. And so part of the strategy of individualising treatment for people is you have to actually lay down some new pathways in your brain of how you respond to those emotions.
Okay.
And so part of what I do is alongside evidence-based treatments such as these medications and surgery, I'm forever breaking these behaviours into little baby steps, little things that are achievable that patients can work on. And as they work on little steps over time, they can make some quite long-term changes. And what we're trying to avoid is diet mentality. We're actually trying to build a healthy relationship with food where nothing's off limits unless there's a medical reason you can't eat something, but where we're having healthy food as the foundation of our food, but we have the opportunity to have something fun on the weekend and yet stay healthy and well. Where what's happened is foods that we used to have every now and again, we're now having every day. And that's one of the reasons that we've got the problem we do in our society with weight. I think part of helping people in this whole area, whether you have obesity or not, is working out how to work out what's everyday food, what's sometimes food and what's occasional food, and making sure we enjoy those guilt-free in those proportions. Because that's one of the other things that people fall into is because they're having things they think is off limits or is a naughty food or an unhealthy food. They then feel guilty after it, or they'll go and binge on it because there's a whole overlay of emotions around the fact that they fell into that hole and ate a block of chocolate again. The more we can set our environment up for success, the better. So that comes down to strategies around what we bring into our home. Because if you bring a big bag of, I don't know, Freddo frogs, since they're the thing of the moment, since they've gone doubled up in price this week.
They shrunk in size.
The moment you bring them into the house, you're agreeing that they're going to be consumed at some point, unless you choose to throw them in the bin. So that's one of the strategies I use is if you're going to have a little chocolate bar, why don't you go out and have a little chocolate bar, but keep your home environment set up in such a way that the choices that you've got are actually going to be healthy. And making the healthier options easy to see. So putting them at eye height in the fridge all ready to go, or putting the big fruit ball on the bench, or where if you've got your lolly jar on the bench where you can see it, that's going to be much harder to resist having a lolly. Like your brain goes, sugary thing that lights up my brain? Like that, addictive part of my brain? Sure, I'll have that.
Or that celery stick with cottage cheese.
Yeah. So coming back to bariatric surgery, the beautiful thing about bariatric surgery is that the weight loss comes off really well in that first year afterwards because we're changing. It's not only a plumbing change, but it's actually an underlying hormone change. And so that little time where they're, scooting down that weight loss curve is the ideal time to keep learning some new skills because at that point they're not hungry. One of the things we know about weight loss, whether it's through diet and exercise or whether it's through medications or surgery, is that when we lose weight, that unconscious part of that brain that we were talking about before remembers our maximum weight we've ever been and drives us back up there.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. And so because they call it the set point. And that's one of the reasons diet and exercise programs fail, is that you've got compensatory mechanisms, which means you fidget less, you become food obsessed. So that a lot of my patients talk about food noise. They just think about food all the time. And your body drives you back up there. And in order to stay at the weight that you were at your set point, when you get back up there, you actually have to eat less than you did last time you were up there. But what people tend to do is do diet mentality where it's yo-yo dieting and they fall back into old habits. And when they do that, then the weight goes up a bit and then that set point goes up a bit. And so I think as you're kind of approaching your 40s and 50s and you're wanting to get on top of things, the first goal is not to put any more weight on and not to push that set point up any higher. And then you can work on getting some good medical care to help get that weight off and keep it off in the long term.
So if you basically went back to what you were doing, like say you go on a crash diet, shredding for the wedding, whatever you're doing, and then you go back to what you were eating before.
You've actually got to eat less next time to stay there.
Why is that?
Well, it's because
your body remembers.
Your body remembers and it changes your metabolism to try and drive it up higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has your metabolism slowed down?
Yeah, it's slowed down. It's changed. And those hormones that are controlling, when you don't have a weight problem, like obesity, you feel full and you stop eating. I've got a number of patients who have, until they've gone on one of these medications that suppresses their hunger, they have never had an off button. They've never felt satisfied at all. And suddenly they go on this and they go, this is what my friends must be, that can sort of have a small portion and just stop and be satisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I blame the all-you-can-eat buffets on cruise ships and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Well, all of these things have not been friends with human beings, have they? No.
But Jen, I'd really love to know what are these different types of bariatric surgery, and what do they actually do?
There's two main ones that we do, two varieties. One's called a gastric sleeve, and that is where about 85% of the stomach is removed, and that's a permanent removal, and you end up with a small sausage-shaped stomach that has a much smaller capacity. And so there is a bit of restriction. You can't go and eat a whole big family pizza to yourself because it just fills up. So there's a little bit of restriction, but it actually works by changing the underlying hormones. So the part of the stomach that gets cut away is where that hunger hormone ghrelin is produced. And so you don't feel hungry, and it changes the way that your body reacts to that set point that we were talking about. So that's the gastric sleeve. The gastric bypass, we don't take any anatomy and throw it in the bin. Everything stays inside, but everything gets reconfigured so that you bypass some of the stomach and a little bit of the small intestine. And so the food skips past that. There's a few varieties of that kind of procedure, but it also changes the underlying hormones and allows the body to let go of weight. Obviously, because we're rerouting the gut in order to result in some weight loss and metabolic change, we need to be careful that we're getting adequate nutrition, especially adequate protein, because the portion of food you can eat is much smaller. And so people have to be supervised under medical care and on multivitamins to make sure they don't become deficient in nutrients in the future. But they're very, very effective, and for the right patient, they're an excellent procedure. And especially we can have some patients that are diabetic and they're on type 2 diabetic on insulin, and they come off their insulin and they can put their put their diabetes back into remission. So it's a very powerful metabolic procedure. And it's like what I said before, we've got to match the right patient with the right procedure. It's not a kind of any, meeny, miny, mo, that one will do for me. It's done with thinking through what's right for the person.
So are there any kinds of patients who wouldn't be right for bariatric surgery at all?
Lots.
Oh, really?
Well, obviously someone who has a whole lot of other health conditions that would put them at risk of surgery, you wouldn't go down that line. Mind you, you know, people who have a lot of excess weight often do have complex health conditions, and if you can't get that weight off, then their life expectancy is fairly poor. So we see a great improvement in some of those patients. We're always looking to check for an underlying eating disorder, because that doesn't necessarily go away if you've had surgery. No. And there are ways of bypassing the effects of these procedures. My common way of explaining it to patients is if you puree Mars bars and suck them through straws all day, you're not necessarily going to keep the weight off long term, which is my facetious way of saying. All these things that we do have to be done alongside a diet and exercise and lifestyle program to have long-term success.
It's true. Like a lot of people would know, pretty famous people who have had some of these procedures, and a lot of them, I used to think it was a third, I don't know what's true, Jenny, you would know, actually keep the weight off, and it's amazing. But then a third of them you go, oh gosh, you're just as big as you used to, like you lost weight and then you regained it, like we're talking about, like your set point, up they go to the set point again. Also because they know if they drink milkshakes, for example, and alcohol, blah, blah, all of those things have so many calories in them that, you know, you can suck into your very small alimentary canal now, but you can suck in a lot of calories and a lot of things that aren't great for you, and up their weight goes again.
And our brain does drive that weight back up in time. But having said that, it's successful for a large number of people. But one of the problems is that these aren't set and forget magic bullet procedures. And this is the thing we need to keep educating patients is obesity is a chronic disease. You never get cured of it. Wow. It's something you're going to live with for the rest of your life, and that tendency to put weight on never goes away. And so with all sorts of chronic diseases, you need ongoing long-term medical care. And the great thing is now that when hunger does return or people are falling back into old habits, if they reconnect with the team, say in our practice with the multidisciplinary team, we can work on getting on top of that or suppressing hunger with some of these other medications. And so it's no different to, you know, if you've got blood pressure and you go on one blood pressure medication and then over time that blood pressure medication isn't working as well as it used to, then doctors will add a second medication to that protocol. Well, it's the same with this chronic disease, which is obesity, that we can add extra interventions in to keep that weight off in the long term. But we can't do that if you ignore the weight going back on and don't come back to get help. So I call them my emu patients. They put their head in the sand and before they know it, they're 15 kilos more, and it's hard to get that off again, where if they come back and they've only put a couple of kilos on, then we can get back on top of things. And so part of this is actually getting that around your head that you're never going to cure it. It's actually going to be something you need to manage lifelong.
That's absolutely fascinating, because I had no idea that it was a chronic illness and that you could never cure it. I just assumed, oh, you're overweight, you go on a new diet, you might get some surgery, but hey, job done. That's it. I'm fine.
And that doesn't mean there's no hope.
Yeah, that's right.
It just means that philosophically you can't just go and forget you ever had it.
Yeah.
But it is, like you say, philosophical. Like if you philosophically have really got it in your head that actually I'm having this procedure, like I'm going to get thinner, which is going to be beautiful, but I'm always going to be someone who needs to care, that is just such a great message to take home. You know, this is a forever thing. Even though I'm slim, it's a forever thing.
But what if the reason for you being obese is just because you've had the worst, a terrible, terrible diet, and you fix that and you get more exercise and you have a good diet? Does that not fix it?
Yeah, it doesn't fix that tendency to weight to go back up again. But certainly if you make changes, you can continue to keep some weight off over time. That's not, the issue. But when it's really quite chronic and you've got quite marked obesity, it's really hard on their own to get it off without help.
Yeah.
And look, it's funny, isn't it? We don't say to asthmatics, just do breathing exercises and and lose a bit of weight because that'll help your asthma. Of course we give them a Ventolin puffer and the rest of it. And yet we've got this whole area of weight management where we think that diet and exercise is the answer for everything. And what's more, it's an interesting area because everyone has an opinion on it, whether they're medically trained or not.
Oh,
That's
yes.
true.
And to me, that's one of the hardest things about it is that you're not condemned to just having the disease. You're condemned to have to put up with the people.
Everyone's opinions.
Yes. Yeah.
That's right. Well, Jen, we'd love to actually talk about, and it's very topical at the moment, a lot of people are talking about weight loss drugs and how they're being used. What's your opinion about these different kinds of drugs and the value of them?
So as I think I mentioned before, I'm really excited about the developments that we've had in this area. Because finally we've got some really effective management medications that don't require you getting your stomach cut out or...
Well, having surgery.
Yeah, having surgery.
Which is always risky.
Which is always risky. And it also allows people a chance to, even if they do end up having surgery, it gives them a chance to try something else first before they've owned that approach. And as I said before, whether you need surgery or not, or whether you need medications or not, really depends on how advanced your disease is and how much excess weight you're carrying. But not only that, what are the implications for you? So someone could be only in the overweight BMI range but had really bad diabetes. And so needing to lose some weight for them is quite key. Or someone might be having infertility issues coming through the IVF clinic and they've been told they need to lose a certain amount of weight in order to improve their chances. Or the orthopaedic surgeon who says, let's think of us oldies who are going to get our knees done one day.
Yes.
You know, like, I'm not going to do your knee replacement until you've lost some weight. And so these drugs have been really game-changing. And we've got a range of drugs. We've got a couple of tablets and then we've got a lot, which I won't mention the brand names, but we've got injectable drugs that bind to certain receptors and are really helpful in reducing appetite and making you feel fuller quicker. Initially, we had medications that would be effective in losing about 8 to 10% of weight, and in some people, they weren't that effective. We've now got a whole range of drugs which is closing the gap between medication and surgery. So we've got medications that are where you're able to lose 15 to 20% of your total body weight, which is nearing a gastric sleeve, which is often 25 to 35%. So we've now got these wonderful drugs that are actually life-changing for people. And so why that's hit the media and why there's been a shortage worldwide in some of these drugs is actually we finally got something that works really well for patients and actually changes their life. You know, I'll have patients who are just thrilled with the weight they've lost and they've improved their health. They're no longer snoring, their knee pains settle down, or they've been able to lose weight and their fertility is improved, or, a number of reasons they might come to see me to get some help. And these medications are well tolerated by most people, and they're really effective, and they actually change people's relationship with food. And so they actually feel like they get a sense of control over food. So where they had trouble saying no to snacking and grazing all day, they actually are happy just to have their 3 meals, and they're not thinking about food between meals. And so they're really quite effective medications for lots of people. In fact, a number of times patients have said, I feel like I give myself an injection of hope because it's really resulted. I've been trying so long with yo-yo dieting and with all these things, and finally something's getting the weight off and keeping it off. I think one of the things people need to understand, it comes back to our discussion about obesity being a chronic disease, is that these things are effective, but you kind of have to stay on them long term. And it's not that people ever don't come off them. If they can maintain their dietary change, they may be able to come off them for a while, but over time they'll start getting hungry again as those compensatory changes crack in.
Actually, I went to a medical lecture on the weekend, Jenny, which went in really hard on not only surgery but actually adding the drugs to it to help people maintain, like long term, to help people maintain.
Yes.
Because they do have such good brain effects that with the kind of very basic thing of plumbing, which is kind of the surgery, then you add in the central, the brain bit with the drugs. Long term, I know it, it's full on, but that's even more successful for people.
These drugs were discovered through type 2 diabetes research, actually, because they do improve the way that the insulin and the whole metabolism around blood sugar control happens. But what is really interesting is that with these medications plus significant weight loss, we can put people who are diabetic or pre-diabetic back into remission. Yeah. And so whereas, I don't know, Amelia, what you remember 30 years ago when we were at medical school, once you got diabetes, it was almost very fatal. Like there was this sense that you couldn't change the course. It would just get worse and worse over time.
And all of the end organ damage. Yeah. It's not just that you have a hypo or something and die. You affect your kidneys and your eyes and, it's just horrible.
Well, now we've got a situation that these medications plus helpful dieting can put you back in. And it's interesting because we talked a bit about all food groups being, ideally it's good to be able to eat a little bit of it, not to have to exclude food groups from your eating. But I think if someone is highly insulin resistant or very diabetic, like they've been diabetic, then they don't process carbohydrates and sugars very well. And it's appropriate for patients like that to talk to their doctors about the possibility of also having more of a low-carb eating pattern to help with that as well. But certainly these medications, if you can get 10 to 15% weight loss and get it early in the process, you can have a really good outcome with these medications.
And especially if, like you said before, people are remembering that actually this is a disease and nothing is an absolute cure. Like this might be a lifelong adherence to these kind of procedures and medications over your lifetime. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's been hard in this area is that the pharmaceutical benefits scheme hasn't chosen to fund these medications.
No.
Okay.
And so patients are having to pay for them.
And they're quite expensive.
So that's hard. And bariatric surgery is expensive too. So we have got some public bariatric surgery happening. There is, especially, I know, Janet, you alluded that the further away you get from major capital cities, the worse this obesity epidemic is, which seems ironic that the farmers are out there. They should be active and having healthy food, but it's not their fault. As remember, it's not your fault.
Not if it's a sugar farm.
Yeah. But we do have some people who can access these therapies with some funding, but most of these patients are having to pay for it out of their own savings.
Is a trifle ironic, I would say, Jenny. I don't know if you agree with this. Yeah, and I'm sure it'll change. I feel optimistic. It is going to change because the very fact that you are cutting down on insulin and changing people's lives actually means that the medical system is actually saving money. Like it's saving money with treatment.
It is. Yeah. Yes, and I think they just worry that too many people will access it. But it is hard, isn't it? Because if it is a disease, then it's interesting that our health funding doesn't match the fact that it's a disease that's not, the fault of the people that have it.
Yeah.
I think maybe there's low awareness of the fact that it's a disease because I had no no idea that it was classified as a disease. I just thought it was a condition. It's like, oh, I'm overweight, you know.
But it is really interesting because losing weight can improve so many things. Like they can come off blood pressure medications, they can come off their diabetic medications, they can delay their knee replacement. Then you've got the people are more successful at work because they're not getting sick as often, they're more active.
Yeah.
So there's just so many flow-on benefits, psychologically, physically, economically, relationally, that, you know, from a health economics point of view, I think in the long term it would benefit our society. But at the moment, we've never, ever had any of these medications funded for
But I can imagine too, another bonus is that when you're lighter, you can exercise more and therefore that would have a knock-on effect as well.
Yes, no, it's much easier. Much easier.
Yeah.
It changes everything, which makes it a lovely area of medicine to work in. Because people's lives really do change and they take up new hobbies, they enter new relationships, they go into new workplaces, they sit on planes and don't have to have an extender or worry about the person next to them in economy going, what are you doing sitting next to me? Like there's a lot of bias around living in a larger body and it's a really difficult situation. So we've now got hope. We've now got these wonderful ranges of interventions that can cope with the people that are carrying an awful lot of excess weight, but also cope with people that only have a little bit of excess weight, which is excellent.
And does it tend to be that if the parents are obese, the children will also be obese, or not necessarily?
Well, it really depends a bit on the genetics, and we all know from. I'm assuming looking at your own kid. I mean, I've got 4 kids, and they're all different, aren't they? So
they are indeed.
So different people will inherit it to different degrees, but it is primarily a genetically inherited condition that gets turned on. And look, it can get turned on in childhood, it can get turned on in puberty, it gets turned on with pregnancy, gets turned on with divorce, it gets turned on with trauma, it gets turned on with stress. Like all sorts of things can turn these genes on.
And what turns them off? The sight of a stick of celery?
And this is what we're talking about. Nothing turns them off that we've discovered
not long term. Yeah. Although there are things we can do. I mean, obviously, if you've gone from having highly processed food and having 3 bottles of Coke a day and all of a sudden you're having protein and all these healthy vegetables, obviously your body's going to respond to that over time.
It's going to scream in agony.
Yes.
Well, it's probably like we've just learned, going to scream at you a bit and say, I need to put the weight back on again.
Yeah. So you're really going against your own instincts. And so, but why are some people really slim and really athletic? Does that mean that their brain is not telling them to eat?
Some of those people are just genetically incredibly lucky. And as Jenny would attest to too, just because they are genetically very lucky in how much they weigh and look, doesn't mean to say that they aren't at risk of other things like atherosclerosis and all the bad things can still happen to the skinny people.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes, you know how I said we can do DEXA scans, which are much more sophisticated ways of working out where the fat is. And we've got people that can be slim on the outside but actually have a fair bit of fat deposited around their internal organs and really not very well at all from a metabolic point of view.
Which is the bad place.
So how can you lose that weight?
The visceral.
The organ fat.
It's called, the visceral fat. Yeah, well, all the ways that Jenny has just mentioned. Yeah.
Okay. So if you take some of those weight loss drugs, for example, if you had like the organ fat, you would lose weight as well as it reducing the fat around your organs. Is that right?
Well, often fat gets deposited when the insulin goes up, and insulin goes up because we have lots of carbohydrate-rich and sugary foods. So part of it is actually thinking about what actually makes up the meals that we eat. And, you know, and not all carbs are bad either. Like there's a big difference between a fluffy donut and a really nice, you know, small
brown rice
or a piece of sweet potato. They're very different. Not all things are equal in their quality of what you're eating. And so,
what about sweet potato fries? Are they okay? I'm asking for a friend.
They're pretty yummy, aren't they, Janet? They might fit in my sometimes food. You're allowed to have those on some Saturday night, but not every night.
Right, I'm making a note. Jenny said.
Yeah, and look, a lot of us, when I think of the 40 plus and fabulous, we often fall into drinking a little bit more alcohol, don't we? Also, as we approach those years as women. Yeah. And that's once again a high calorie rich fluid that can actually, it drives our metabolism and it's not helpful. It doesn't mean you can't have any, but that's another example of you might not be having bottles of Coke like the 14-year-old on the way home from, or energy V drinks or whatever on the way home from school, but you can have far too many standard drinks at night as you're making dinner. So that's another area of thinking through, how you manage that as you approach menopause and work that out.
It's interesting, just going back to an earlier comment that you made about like junk food being a lot cheaper than healthy food.
I know. Isn't that outrageous?
I bet that really drives you crazy, does it?
Well, it is interesting because how much do you reckon a bag of carrots is from one of our?
I know.
Yeah, but who wants to eat a bag of carrots?
It's like, I suppose I'm saying like the really yummy version of the good food.
Yes, it's
costs a lot more than the yummy version of the bad food.
I mean, if you buy an avocado, for example, it might be $2.50. You can buy a burger for that, and it's going to fill you up a lot more, right?
And I suppose, it's really interesting because I have a number of patients who, when you look at how many vegetables they like, they're almost still eating like they did when they were 2. So part of that, that's also, if you just like buying seasonal vegetables and you're happy to eat a range of them and fill your plate with them, you're probably not spending too much money. It's probably, the eye fillet steak that you're putting on there that's a bit too expensive at the moment.
And
so
and
that can also impact families, is that you get into patterns of cooking and eating, and that's why everybody's got an individual path out of this disease, because everybody comes to it with their different strengths and weaknesses and things that they are good at and things that they are not, and things that they find hard to manage and things they find easier to manage.
Jenny, I think it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you.
It has been fascinating.
And if our listeners are hearing this and thinking, okay, I think it's about time I really did something for either for myself or for my kids, what might be their next steps in terms of treating this disease?
I think it's really worth going, even if you don't go, if you're worried about your kids, you don't necessarily need to take them along, but go and have a chat to your GP. Because GPs and make a long appointment. GPs are time poor, and you come in with your list, and it's hard for them to raise weight issues because they don't want you to take offence. But if you come and say, I'd like to talk about my weight, I'm sure they'll be happy to. And there's now such a range of medications and different approaches that you can take, that they've actually got a lot more in their armament than just go and eat lettuce. Like the diet food or whatever. And so I think that's a good place to start. But I also think within your family environment, just making little changes, even learning to shop at the supermarket and staying around the edges of the supermarket and not going down every aisle where all the fresh produce is. It's just about making baby steps over time and making some changes to the environment that the children are in within the family. But there is help available, and so it is worth going and having a chat to your doctor and just getting some help. Many people will be able to be managed at the level of the GP, and there'll be some that need to come to a specialist clinic like the one I work in. And the beauty of me being in my role is I've got the luxury of time, of being able to spend time with patients and do a real health coaching role that when I was in busy general practice, you're under a lot more time pressure. And so there is help out there.
Yeah, that's awesome, isn't it? And
it is. That's hopeful, I think, at the end of this.
An injection of hope. So do you feel pressure to keep your own weight down because you're in this industry?
Well, I'm not morbidly obese, but I do I sort of sit right on the border of overweight and obese if I'm not careful. But I actually really like the fact that I struggle with it, because my style as a doctor is to get down beside people and say it is hard and to actually understand that it's a journey, and that it's tricky, and that we're all human and we'll all fall into holes here and there and have to hop ourselves up and get back on track with our behaviours we do around food. So, yes, I don't...
Fascinating.
I think what's more important to my patients is that I'm actively managing and taking responsibility for the choices I make around my health rather than being all perfect. I think if I was skinny mini model, it would be harder for them to relate to me in many ways.
Intimidating.
Exactly. I think quite a lot of people have been put off by, and often they're quite interested in it, the very, very slender young dietitian, female dietitians sometimes freak people out because they're so young and so slim that they just, everyone thinks, of course she has no idea about what I'm going through. Yeah.
That's right.
You're a normal person,
I'm a
Jenny.
normal human
Yes,
being, and I go and I get stressed and I go and eat something I shouldn't. We all do that, isn't it?
Oh, really? What would be your go-to kind of treat if you
What's my
if you had a
go-to
treat?
treat? Ooh, I think brie or camembert or something like that.
Oh,
That's my go-to. Yeah, cheese platter's my go-to treat. I do sometimes go to my husband goes to chocolate. He's got this uncanny. I can hide the cooking chocolate in the back of the cupboard for the brownies I'm making when people are coming over for dinner next week, and he'll find them and I'll go and get it. Yeah, but it's interesting what we do. But look, there's place for having a beautiful piece of creamy brie on a cracker.
There is, Jenny. There is.
Yeah.
Stop it. Well, Dr. Jenny, thank you so much. I think this is going to be so helpful to so many people
I think it is
listening.
too.
I think we all know someone who's in that category, and
Well, it's very common, as we've
discovered.
Yeah.
But to know that there's help out there and solutions, and lots of them, and people like you who are just fabulous to talk to. So thank you so much for coming on. She Wasn't Born Yesterday.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I've had a lovely time.
Gorgi, thanks for listening in today. We hope you enjoyed this ep.
But we'd really love to hear more from you. We'd love to know exactly what you actually think of us and our guests.
So if you're on Spotify, you can rate us. We love stars. And on Apple Pods, write us a little blurb. Let us know what you think, and hopefully we can keep going. Apple loves their algorithms, and we love you. So thanks for listening. We really enjoy your company.
See you next week on She Wasn't Born Yesterday.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.